Right, thank you so much once again for staying with us, and it's now time for our conversation. Remember, our discussion today is on Pan-African Women's Day, which I did tell you is on Monday, July 31st, but we do things early here, yeah? So we're having that conversation today. Mheshimiwa, karibu sana.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I see you got the memo, yeah?
I know,
so
right? We're matching.
Saturday and the shoes.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
All right, so Her Excellency Dr. Joyce Banda joins us virtually for this conversation. And I would like to actually start with you, Your Excellency. Thank you so much for joining us today. And happy Pan-African Women's Day in advance. Tell me, Your Excellency, what does this day mean to you?
To start with, I must be grateful to those who were wise enough to establish the day and they call it what it is. The reason being that I'm of the view that African women played a very critical role in shaping our destiny. When we look at Africa and its history and the participation of women, particularly in the positions of leadership, we were leaders even before colonization. You hear about strong women and famous women and courageous women like Queen Asentawa in Ghana, who resisted colonization when her male counterparts were welcoming it. You will see that when you read the history of that famous lady, in the end, they succeeded in colonizing Ghana. They sent her away. She ended up living in Seychelles until she died. Those are the kind of women we are talking about. In fact, in some books, when you read history, they say that it is colonization that brought the women of Africa back, because the colonizers did not know how to incorporate our skills and us in their structures, because where they were coming from, women were not participating in leadership. You hear about women like Winnie Mandela, Bettina Sisulu, famous women across Africa that stood to the occasion and fought alongside their brothers. Some ended up in prison, some ended up losing their lives. So when today we talk about Africa and what we have been able to achieve, we must always and forever, including women, talk about the role that women played. Why? Because we haven't done badly.
Right. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that. And Honorable Jane, you have heard from Dr. Joyce Banda there. And this day, Pan-African Women's Day, is meant to celebrate our foremothers of this continent. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Joyce Banda there, Amina Garib. What have you learned from these predecessors of women leaders like you?
I think first I want to, thank Her Excellency for having the time for this conversation. And, we have quite a huge age difference. So we have, the ones who've been there before us, and we have the new crop of politicians. And for me, I think these women, like Her Excellency, have made it possible for me to sit here and have a leadership position. I remember we had this conversation with Martha Karua, and in around 2000s, women could not wear pantsuits in Parliament, And, so it is something that is progressive. And I think perhaps we take it for granted. And I feel a bit ashamed that we don't have that as institutional memory, so that to see where we have come from. So we need to really see how, as African women, we can document it so that we are also able to learn from the same, so that we don't have the same cycle of trying to reinvent the wheel. And for me, I think this day is really important to the leadership of women and the new crop of leaders coming up, because at the end of the day, really, we are riding on the shoulders of the women who came before us.
Right, right. Okay, Dr. Joyce, back to you. And I'd like to know some of the challenges that female leaders face, challenges that you yourself have faced to get to the helm of a country's leadership.
I didn't have young men and women to fight for me, because what really works against us is the way that society will judge you depending on what social media and the media depicts, what they want people to believe about you. They'll build that image. And if you don't fight back, it is about perception. People will believe, and then that is what will form Joyce Banda. So you must have a team that is alert, that is knowledgeable, that will know when propaganda is thrown at you and fight back. So one challenge that women don't have is that they don't know how to build that team. They don't know how to fight back. Because for us as women leaders, all we know is we want to do things right. We want to transform lives of the poor. We want to implement poor projects. But what politics is about is more than that. So once you are doing that good job, somebody must be able to draw the attention of people as if they have no eyes. That's what you are able to do. Because if you don't, they will just throw stones at all you are doing. And then at the end of the day, you will not believe how people will not see what you've been trying to do. So having a team, the media is key. You must have a team working and fighting with you and for you throughout your journey. Number two, you must have the resources. Politics is about having money. Because if you go into a typical village where I stood as member of parliament in the beginning, you want to have workshops for women, workshops for youth, for men, to tell them what you are able to do. Many times, communities lose a good leader because they didn't have money. She was a woman, she couldn't compete, she couldn't organize, she couldn't pass on the message. She was trodden down by strong men with negative messages, so she couldn't fight back. So you must have a team, you must have resources, you must also work extra to make sure that you are visible in the community, right, where you are standing as member of parliament. Yes, you must do charitable work. You must help the needy. You must be at the church. You must be visible. You must raise your voice on behalf of the voiceless. So they must look up to you and respect you. And that will come along, men and women, if you are doing it right.
Right. Jane, I'm curious, did you experience similar challenges like the one Dr. Joyce is talking about? Or have times changed and thus made things easier for women?
No, they haven't. You know, I think the more things change, the more they remain the same. And people like to take away from women. They like to discredit women. And more so, the only way you can discredit a woman is use their anatomy, you know. So you find on social platforms, I mean, when I announced my candidature and said I'm vying, and people are like, oh, who's the mind behind, you know, and they're like, oh, must have been so-and-so who has, you know, who's putting you here. And that is the only way that people can take away from a woman. And people like to judge women who are in charge. You know, they will say you're bossy or you're aggressive, you're assertive, but you don't get that with men. You know, when men take charge and they take lead, you never hear someone say, oh, that man is bossy, that man is assertive, right? That man is outspoken. I think we were in a society for so long that was conditioned to think that, you know, women should not take and exert this space. And I'm glad that Daktari has touched on finances, you know. Mm-hmm. It has been an issue in the long term of it, because at the end of the day, you need money to move around in politics. Even if you're not dishing around money, maybe perhaps you just need to caucus some young people together. And you find that oftentimes we don't have a society that believes in the capacity of women to lead, because for a very long time the social setup was men taking charge and, you know, women doing, you know, the housework and all that. And growing up, sometimes I'd run into issues with my mom. She was like, no, you need to learn how to do the dishes properly. And I'm like, no, why can't my brothers do it too?
What did she say?
You know, and I remember one day she was like, oh, you know, then if you don't learn these things, you'll never find a husband. I was like, I do not need one. I will be somewhere, you know, doing some other greater things. So I think it's good that we have these discussions, and for the people who've been there before, like Daktari, you know, in the Kenyan space, Martha Karua, the Charity Ngilu, for them to have an intentional, to just take intentional
lead
support for, you know, young women who are in politics, because I tell you, you get in and it's just a huge ocean. You're just swimming, you know, to try see here and there. So we sort of repeat the same things that happen because they've been there before, they know the road. But at the end of the day, I think we just really do as much as we can.
Right. Dr. Joyce, what needs to be done to have women go, or more women go for these top seats or any elective position? How hard do we have to push for this?
Yeah, there's so much that we must do. And sometimes I get worried because I feel that we women ourselves are not pushing as hard as we were pushing in 1995 when we went to Beijing. What we agreed in Beijing, some of us who were there, we decided that we're going to come back to Africa to participate in leadership, to get into positions of leadership. And we did, and we came back, and we've done well. But I think what was not part of that discussion was then when we get into leadership, what is it that we will do as women to support one another to stay in the job? For example, if you look at all the 6 women that have been heads of state on the continent of Africa, you will find that they've faced many serious challenges that sometimes men don't face. But then the problem is they didn't have the kind of support that they required to fight back and to stay in the jobs. Most 3 years is the maximum they could stay. People have asked me, are you a feminist? And I've said yes, but an African feminist. Why? Because our approach must be different, must be sensitive. Our approach will be where we engage our men folk on the continent. That if we are saying men are the problem, that they are not opening space at the policy formulating table, then they must be part of the solution of that problem. Now, in Africa, I have found that if you try to push them, then they fall back and you fall back together. They will not open that space. So there's so much that we must do in order for us to increase the numbers of women on the continent.
Right, Dr. Joyce. And Honorable Jane, I could see you nod as, Dr. Joyce was speaking there, and I'm glad she mentioned support, the same thing you were saying before I posed a similar question to her. Let's talk about you, because we're talking about having more women go for these top seats. What are your aspirations? Are we going to see Jane and Jerry someday, 2027 or 2032, vying for a top seat?
I think first I want to add on to something that Dr. Joyce has said. You find that we have a leadership ambition gap. And I'm reading this book, it's called Lean In by Cheryl. And you find that we fought, or rather the women who've been there before us, fought for women to have the will to choose. But then you find that in the societal setup, as we progressed, men did not take up roles in maybe perhaps helping in equal part in raising children. So find you have this ambitious woman like me, who's in politics, who's moving around and just trying to do everything at a go. And then back at home, I'm expected to be a mother, to nurture my kids, to have time to talk to them, to change the diapers. And so you find that women do not have the necessary support, even as we progress, to give them the free choice. So at the end of the day, you're caught up in a situation where you're like, okay, one thing has to give. So for most women, what gives? Their career, their profession. They do not want to get to the next level. They don't want to push themselves so hard, because at the end of the day, there is no one who is stepping in to help back at home. So it's not fair to the woman, and it's unfortunate. That's why you find that even if we have now more females empowered, you still find that at the board level, we have very few females taking the lead, because we have all these things to do. And in a personal capacity, I am very ambitious. I have never lacked of ambition. And I know that in future I will be going for whatever top position will be available, because I believe in progression. And but I still want to really learn the basics of politics and just have the roots. If you look at Joyce Banda, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, they had really deep roots in politics. Right. They vied for various positions, served in different positions. Right. So that when I get to the top seat, I will have the necessary and command the attention and the know-how.
Right. Okay, so my director is telling me we need to take a break. Let's take a very, very short break. Stay with us. We carry on with this conversation on the other side. Right, thank you so much once again for staying with us. Now time is totally not on my side. So Dr. Joyce, I'd just like to get sort of like your closing remarks on what advice you'd want to give to the young crop of female leaders on the continent.
I would like younger women on the continent of Africa not to be discouraged, to look back and say the women that came before us did the best that they could. Just go into history and see what our women fought gallantly, side by side with our men, starting before colonization, to fight, to participate in leadership, and participated well. And then take it upon themselves, I'm talking about the younger women on the continent, that it is their turn and that they cannot do it alone, that we will stand prepared, those of us who have been there and back, to support them and to give them support to make sure that they don't walk on this vicious journey alone. I have every hope that as we continue to form networks, and as those of us who are older continue to raise our voices on their behalf, the younger women of Africa have a brilliant future and they will do very well. And may God bless you all.
Right. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Dr. Joyce Banda, for honoring our invitation today.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Njeri, we do not have time. I know you had a lot to say for this conversation, but there's something I want us to watch because I watched it at first and did not believe it was you, yeah? So I believe we have it. Nick, let's do that.
I've been around and around the world looking for love. If someone told me love is in the wind, I'd follow it. Lakini wapenzi
I want to say about that clip, and I want to ask about the hair.
I know.
But keep in mind we don't have much time. I want you to say something about it as you give advice to fellow women leaders. Your parting shot, there's so much I know you want to say in this parting shot.
I see a young, ambitious woman who believed in herself and her capacity. And I've always been someone who goes after what she wants and someone who is very assertive. And I want to tell young women that there is space for you in politics. And I want to tell all women leaders that there is so much space, enough for all of us. We need to lean in. We need to lean onto each other. We need to hold each other's hand so that we can raise the bar even higher. And I want to see more women even engaging on the table in regard to the peace talks that we'll be having in this nation. I want to see women leading and taking charge. And I am here for you. You can always reach out on my social platforms, and I will be glad to help when I can. Jane Jeremiah.
Great, perfect. Yes. Thank you. That's a great place to end it. My director, and he keeps telling me we need to wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching today. Of course, the sign language interpreter has been Catherine Simaloy. Thank you to my guest, Honorable Jane.